Hey, it's Chris. Liege Games. It's Friday. You know what that means. Kickstarter Round-up. What's launched this week? How's it doing? What's going on? What do you need to know about it? Let's do it. As always, hopefully it's a little bit slower week this week. But if you're so inclined, shoot me a buck on Patreon. New, regular vlog behind the scenes of what's going on and what's upcoming. So a little bit extra for you as well, as sort of a community membership bonus, if you will. Anyway, that's not why you're here. That's not what you want to see. Let's talk Kickstarters. Let's do it. So first up is SwiftWave, the turn-cutting action card game. Now, you might be really impressed by that, and it's already funded with the first day done, almost $5,000, which is really interesting because the average pledge is only $21 here for the first wave, and the Kickstarter is $23, which is kind of weird because there's only two backers down here at the $200 level, so that's only 400. This is 460. I mean, that doesn't add up to $4,800 already. Somebody in there is putting way over the amount, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This is weird. The other reason I'm talking about it is because it basically looks like a combination of Spoons and Uno. Spoons in the sense that you just go and rush and pass and do it. And Uno in the sense that you're just playing. I mean, the cards are draw twos, reverses, color changes, numbers. And they've just given it a fancier, more colorful version and said that you can interrupt people. I mean, look at the artwork. I mean, it's basically the same thing. Look at the special ones down here. You can just cut in turn of someone else, essentially. And that's cool, I guess, because it's not copied. I mean, but color, changing the color, a draw, a skip, a reverse, like you basically just did Uno, except you can interrupt people. This doesn't add up money-wise, like I said, so that makes me concerned. Like, really? Okay. But it launched, it's funded, just be aware. It is what it is. I mean, if you want to play Uno with interrupting, with a little bit better color scheme, there you go. I mentioned this last week, and this was a really interesting one, and I wasn't kidding about a lot of games bundle. They literally called it that. It's just a game of 10 roll-and rights that are bundled together that you can pay for, and a goal of $78. So this is a project that would not have funded otherwise. This is Kickstarter Indie 101. And I love the fact that it's just, hey, this is what it is. You know, here you go, guys. And the price point is what it was as well. You can just get the basic games for 4 or 6, or 5 of them for $8. A different 5 for $8, so you can see the difference. Or if you want all of them, it costs you $14. There's a little bit of an early bird for $11, but you know, if you like print and plays, roll and writes, that sort of thing, this is exactly what it is. It's got a little bit of everything. This is the one I think I highlighted in the picture from Facebook last week, Mixture, and it's just worth checking out if you like this type of game, because you're probably not going to find a better deal, especially if you have a color printer yourself. You could print most of these, laminate them, and for even if you're missing the early bird pledge right now, for $14 for 10 games, unless all of these are just totally bleh, there have to be at least some that you'll like in here, and no shipping cost because you're printing it. I mean, if you like those print and play type of games, I think you got to check this out. There's a reason it's at $3,000. Makes sense to me. Makes sense. No problem knowing why this one funded already. Next up, also one that I mentioned last week, Prosperitea, the game of artisanal tea blending through 2 phases. And this was a relaunch actually by Mentha Designs, and I saw them post online as well on one of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of, and they said, you know what, we relaunched today because, you know, we realized the first time that we launched, we just made some big mistakes and just didn't do things the way we should have, and it has paid off, literally and metaphorically, because they're already 120% of their funding goal at this point. So that's great. I like to see projects that do this. $24, you're getting everything that you would need. $24 if you actually want tea. So how many of your games can you actually buy accoutrements in the form of food or beverage? Well, this is one. Basic blend, $29, including all the stretch goals, except for the aluminum coins. And then you get the tea as well. You get the specialty for the $39. And then if you want the tea in a fancy box, and by that I mean the game in a fancy box, it's going to cost you $85. So a little bit of everything gets you $275. Anyway, more about the game. So I mean, you're opening your own tea shop. You're handcrafting the teas so that you're trying to attract customers. And here you have all of your basic ingredient cards that you're going to be using to craft these teas. And then you have the recipes or the order cards that you're going to be trying to make, as well as all of your various tokens. Like I said, here are your various pledge levels. The $29 pledge gets you the game and 3 tea samples of the stretch goals. The $39 gets you a tea strainer as well. So a $10 tea strainer and tea pouch. Anyway, yeah, I guess so. There you go. There's the pledge levels. And if you just want tea, $24. So what are you actually doing? I mean, they have a free print and play edition, and now this is, I like people doing this because they've really taken after, I think, Root was probably one of the first ones to do it. That was one of the bigger ones. But hey guys, try our game out. That should be more of the prevailing trend. Try our game out, see if you like it, because we believe in it so much that you'll see what you'll like and you'll back us anyway. That's putting your money where your mouth is. So especially with a small company like this, it's great to see that. They have the current rules up, so you can download the rules as well. A couple big reviews by some of the bigger channels here. So, and we've got some stretch goals already. So that should be great. And this is probably a company, now I know there's a lot of skeptics like myself. These are probably stretch goals that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So I believe that these are actually legit stretch goals because like I said, they didn't fund last time. So they're not guaranteed to do it this time. And it just looks like a solid quality project. I mean, I imagine this being, somewhere in the lines of, $15,000 to $30,000 by the time it finishes, depending on how much momentum it gets and how much it's eaten up by a lot of the other larger projects that are going, because this is a very busy, crowded market, and this has been a very, very busy month, as you've seen in the last 2 roundups that I've done. 21 games each, 42 games, plus a huge couple of behemoths coming next week, and even the week after, to the 23rd and the 30th, folks. I'll tell you right now, as a side note, those are going to be big dates. There's going to be a lot of money spent before the end of this month. So some of the ones in this past week are going to be ending before then, but there's going to be a lot of overlap. And even the rulebook in this game, like I mentioned, it's a 5-page rulebook. The first page is background, and the last page is basically very little. So it's really a 3-page rulebook. So it's going to be easy to get to the table. It's going to be very complete, very quick. And for all of you solo junkies, there is a solo component as well. You can see very quickly how you're doing the ingredient cards, how you're doing the order cards, how you're sourcing, so where you're getting the cards from and how you're drawing them each turn. So it's not a complicated game, and so there's not a lot of overhead, and I think people are looking for that now nowadays, me, myself included. So all in all, again, no surprise why it's funded. It's just how much more is it going to fund and where is it going to end up. Check it out. You got 4 weeks. Now we have Nutty Squirrels of the Oakwood Forest. I mentioned this one last week, and it's almost at its funding goal on day 1 because it is sort of this amalgam between a adult Press Your Luck and sort of a kid's version in terms of the artwork as well as the gameplay. And I'm a little bit of a sucker, I hate to say that, for Press Your Luck, especially when it has something like Quacks where, boom, that sort of thing. And so I'm not surprised this is doing well because it sort of touches on that element. And I know if you guys are like me, that's always sort of a little bit of a blind spot. And the only thing I'm surprised by right now is the fact that, one, they have an early bird, so you're going to miss out at that by the time this launches because it's only a 24-hour early bird. And that's probably in part why it's funding. And I feel mixed about these, especially with the indie games. Like, they do it to get funded in the first place, but at the same time, then is it going to stall once the $5 difference is sort of taken into account? And that's the only problem. I mentioned it last week. It's a relatively straightforward game. You have these 6 branches going out from the trees, and you're going to be doing one of 3 actions on your turn. You're going to be flipping a card, you're going to be grabbing acorns, or you're going to be trying to move. And what I mean by grabbing acorns is you can do 2 things with your acorns. You can either bury an acorn, and you have your own player board that you can do it at a certain depth in terms of how you want to do it, either to make it somewhat safe or completely safe, but obviously it's going to take more of a turn in that sense, or more of an action in order to bury it deeper so that no one else can get it. So you're going to have less time, less actions to do other things, or you can convert 5 brown acorns into 1 golden acorn. And I think that has more to do with being able then to move around because you can only store so many acorns on your person at one time. On your squirrel at one time. And you can see here, I mean, it's a relatively straightforward game. And the difference is that these cards are going to be, and this is where the pressure light comes in, is you don't know what these cards are going to be in the first place. This one, for example, is a branch breaks and you fall and you lose any of the acorns that you were carrying if you hadn't already stashed them. But there are other abilities, there are other things that you can use to interact with. And you can see a little bit of here is where that board that I mentioned just is. So store 2 in your cheeks, store them here in the nest. But if you want to bury them, that's where you're really going to get points. And so this is also where people can steal. And then you can hold 3 power-ups along the side in order to make your squirrel a little bit better at one of those aspects that I mentioned. Here are those power-ups. Jumping over those limbs that I mentioned that are going to be broken, right there. And then jumping from limb to limb, so you can jump from the tree spokes, essentially. Then you have the extra actions per turn, carry more, steal it from other people, and then you can use an owl to scare another squirrel. There's a solo mode, which is a procedurally generated maze, and it's more of resource management with a combination of risk-taking, again, with pressure luck. And there you go. Up to 6 players can play at the same time. So it is sort of this tweener game, where you could see this being a sort of... reminds me of Fireball Island, if you will, where there's still going to be some element of pure luck, but there can be some mitigation in terms of skill, so it could appeal to a broader range and a broader audience. They mention and they list 2 of their other games here that you can get, Tanks But No Thanks and Queen of Scots. I don't know anything about either of those games. I actually have some big reviews on here by some of the bigger channels, and that's about it. There's a couple stretch goals if they actually fund, which I'm guessing that they won't have any trouble with after this hot start, relatively speaking. And there you go. But I guess for a $15 shipping price and a $37 pledge, even at the beginning, that's $52 already. And for a semi-kids game, that is probably just a smidge too light to play with my regular gaming group, it'd be a pass. Now, if this was $25, I would be all for it. I mean, 25 but and maybe $5 shipping, $30 total, I could probably swing. But at this price point, I'm going to have to pass and kind of see what happens on the retail side of things or pick it up secondhand. So all in all, though, I mean, I can see why it's funded. Champions Rise. Now, I talked about this last week as well, about generic sort of champions fighting a villain in a battlefield, and there wasn't a whole lot of information pre-launch, and that in combination with this relatively lofty goal of 32,000, and I say that semi-seriously, semi-facetiously, just because, I mean, you saw the squirrel goal, and I never know with a $32,000 goal, is that a true goal? Is it higher than it needs to be? What else is going into that $32,000 goal? And nowadays, you don't see people breaking it down like, oh, well, 16,000 is going to be this, 10,000 is going to be that, 4,000 is going to be this, 2,000 is going to be that. And so you can see how it's actually doing in that sense. But there usually isn't anything like that, so it's hard to say. Now, it looks like they're going to have a Dice Tower preview later this week, probably the morning you guys are going to be viewing this. And so you can probably just check it out there. Here you go, though. This is your lowest tier. It gets you the base game with the stretch goals for $45. And you get, what is the difference here? An exclusive poster for $15 more. So that's not a very good deal, because most of the time, especially nowadays, a lot of people aren't going to want to pay for the superfluous. If you throw it in as sort of an extra thank you, like if you threw in an expansion with this and the poster, most people wouldn't care. But most people are looking for game and the other stuff sort of as extras at this point. A couple videos. Now, I need to see what this actually means. I want to see on a game page, and this is a long game page, but you've got the videos at top, which is good, but where are all of these mechanisms taking place? How are they actually working? I mean, there's a lot of terms here, but I don't see the terms in action, and that's what you really need to see. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more. What's in the box? Okay, good. You get all the, various champions and all the specialties that you can mix and match. And then you get the villains. Why back now? Pledge tiers. Stretch goals. So I'm almost halfway down, and I've hit everything else but the rulebook and but the explanation. And yes, there's videos at the top, but at the same time, a lot of us don't always click on the videos right away. Like, if I'm really interested in a project, I'm definitely going to be watching a video. But initial first impressions are what they are, and when you only give me keywords, it doesn't give me a good sense of, right now, I'm halfway down your page, and what makes your deck builder, champion versus villain, unique and different besides the keywords that you've mentioned, and I'm honestly not sure yet at this point. Okay, background, social goals, a little bit of social goals still, unlocks, okay. So finally, we get down to a little bit of what it is. This doesn't tell you what it is. It just tells you more of what it's doing. Okay, it's describing the mechanisms, but again, I'm not seeing it. Like, don't tell me in this situation. I want you to show me. This is a show, not tell. You can be revived. Okay, good. Deck size. Okay. Very superficial stuff. I didn't see a rulebook. Maybe I missed it. Additional information, shipping. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just show me. There's no show. There's all tell. Tell mixed with the stretch goals and everything else. So I don't get an understanding of what makes this different and how to play it based on anything you've seen on this page so far, except for there's one interview and there's one how to play with the dice tower. So you need more on there to entice someone like myself, to entice anyone that's even looking at this going, why do I need to give this a shot versus all of the other asymmetric dueling, light deck building type games, anything else that's out there remotely close, and I just don't see it. So sadly, I think this funding goal is a reflection of that, as opposed to the other pages that you've seen that have a lot more of that information. So I can't give a judgment on what the game actually is or how the game actually looks, is because I just don't know. And if I'm not sure, and if it's not immediately catching my eye, especially like I mentioned earlier in the video, the bar is set high now that I'm going to pass and I might not come back. So that's Champions Rise so far. Next up is a 1 to 2 player game from Button Shy Games. For 1 to 2 players, tableau building Death Valley for $10. I mean, $10 game has already raised $26,000, so I'm wondering if it's like the other small box games that we saw earlier this month, where they're allowing other pledges from their previous catalog. Yep, exactly. There you go. So that's the reason why it's so much higher, and so they're just allowing a lot of other games from their catalog to be ordered as well alongside of it. And as I've said before, I kind of have mixed feelings about that, because it kind of is fine, but at the same time, it kind of artificially inflates the funding goal to make people think it's going faster and better than it might otherwise be if you're only offering that product. Anyway, it's a tricky slope, and I understand why you do it both ways, because especially as a small company, you want to make sure that you have enough. You don't want to have too much overhead. So, I mean, the fact is that with this game and with these games that they offer, I mean, this is what you get. I mean, it's a wallet-sized game. That's their whole motto. And so you're going to have journey cards. You're going to be able to move their journey to their scrapbook. There's points, there's special abilities, values of cards. These are games that are relatively well thought of on the quick one-player side of things. I see most people playing these as solo games. I don't know how many people actually play them as 2-player games, as though they're listed as 2-player. So I'd be interested to see sort of what the actual breakdown was on that. And their other thing is it's an 18 card game. Everything is accomplished within these 18 cards. I mean, the game itself, it sounds like it's relatively straightforward. There's a face-up card. You choose to add the face-up or face-down card from either the one that you see or from the top of the deck to your journey, or you rest. If you rest, you have to move one card from your journey to your scrapbook, and then shuffle as many of the remaining journey cards into your deck as you choose. So after you take your turn, though, you're going to have hazards that are among the visible cards between the journey and the scrapbook. If you have 3 of the kind, you bust, and one of them is removed from the game, and the rest of them get shuffled back into the deck. So when there's only one card remaining, the game ends, and you count up how many stars are visible in your journey. And there's a solo mode, and the stretch goal is going to be a free mini expansion. So 6 more cards. And like I said, they have a PNP, the stretch goal, the intro to all these games for $30, and then the real life location bundle, just a different set for $30, and retailers. So add-ons, as you can see, here you go, and a little bit of everything else. Otherwise, it's a relatively short campaign. You're going to be getting it supposedly in July, so 4 months from now. Again, cards, print run, probably already got most of the artwork and the design done, so it's more just a money and a production side of things, which makes sense. And there you go. 10 days left. It's not going to be long. So, small game, short campaign. Next up is Mixtape Massacre Director's Cut. It's already 150% funded after the first day. Now, Director's Cut being, this is sort of a 2.0 version. Basically, the theme is pick your horror Halloween type villain, Jason, whatever else series you were a fan of, Scream. And you're going around town and just doing that. Laughing and slashing is their tagline. 2 to 6 players, 1980s pop culture, horror tropes. I mean, so everything like I just mentioned. Now, what does this new edition have? It has updated rules, components, mechanics, and even killer additions. Ooh, bad pun. Not even dad pun would do that. So upgrade pack is going to be $25. The improved game is going to be $50. And $50 is also going to get you the early edition. So you're probably going to be too late by the time you see this to get the early bird. And then you have the deluxe edition as well, which includes the mini pack here. And the Killer Seeds Dune, which includes the mini pack. And they say pricing in the bundle is not available after the campaign ends. So that's tricky. That's tricky. So they're saying, you know what? And I guess that needs some clarification, and maybe it'll be a little bit down further on the page. Like, okay, is the price going to be different? Are you just not going to offer the bundle? Are you not going to offer upgrades? Are you not going to basically tease to late backers or $1 backers? So we'll see. Tokens, scenes, okay, a bunch of stuff, slasher pieces, standees is what they're going with, which is probably explaining the price. You have 10 different slashers that you can choose from, all mock-ups of those various movies that I sort of mentioned at the beginning, of that 80s pop culture horror style. Heroes, and all your tokens. And now, you know, this is a second edition. I honestly haven't heard of the first edition, but it's got 60,000 bucks in the first day, which is pretty good, actually, for a game I've never heard of. So, you know, it must be doing something, and people must be interested in it from that side of things. So what are you actually doing, though? So it's a relatively straightforward game, just reading through their explanation here. You start the game, they use a little Sampo token knife in order to keep track of how much health you have. And the big thing that they say is you can see these purple dice that are right here. And these purple dice they're focusing on because those are your movement dice. This is essentially a little bit of a roll and move type of game with a little bit of added nuance. And so you move, and then depending on where you move, you can land on a location with a scene marker. And then that's where the action begins. You have the ability to roll an attack, or if you miss, or if the person or the souvenir/victim escapes, then you have to roll dice to see if you're hit or you defend. If you get down to 2 life or less, they say you're constantly injured, and those purple dice that I just mentioned, well, you only get to roll 1 of them from now on, so you can't move as fast or as far. Then you're going to be finding stuff if you successfully slash somebody. You get a free search, and if not, you can also use other search icons to draw a card from the supply deck as well. You can get abilities that are going to make you harder to kill and how you can catch your victims easier. And then sometimes you can attract a hero, so you have to deal with a hero that may be attracted to the noise and the ruckus that you're causing in the first place, as well as potentially fighting against other slashers. And then how do you win? Well, first one that gets 10 kills, or the last one standing alive, wins. Now, they do have some add-ons down here at the bottom, so if you're really looking for miniatures, if you're looking for an expansion that has more of the Halloween theme, they've got that. They've got a little Kickstarter exclusive card, and then they've also got updated profile, sort of an upgrade kit right there. Here's the expansion that they talk about a little bit more detail, Hallows Eve expansion. So you're adding a new bad guy, you're adding the scare character piece, this guy, you're adding 2 new slashers, 2 new characters, just more of everything else, it seems like. So there you go. Few stretch goals maybe here down at the bottom. Here's the mini pack they talk about. Here's the stretch goals. So you're just getting a little bit more of everything for the hero, for the cards, another hero, some action dice, some hero minis. So there you go. It's definitely just something different. Not for me. It's a little bit too straightforward. And I had a friend in school that was a really big fan of Halloween horror movies, but horror and me just never really mixed. So this theme is a complete pass for me, but I know a lot of people out there like it. I mean, clearly. So it's doing well. Dungeon Date. Now, I mentioned this one last week, and I had no idea what to expect with this. It's a third of the way through its funding after the first day. Romance, befriend, and slay cute dungeon monsters in a card game, 2 to 4 players. So it's a tableau builder, apparently. So there wasn't a whole lot of information prior to the campaign about this. If they fund in 72 hours, you get 4 free new monsters, which isn't insignificant because there are 36 monster cards in the game to begin with. So all the stuff you see here. So what are you doing? You're just choosing an action, revealing the card, visiting, and deciding on what to do depending on what symbols match. And if you go to the same door, you fight. Winner encounters the monster, loser gains spite, whatever spite may be. And then you're collecting sets in order to get more points. It just looks like straight up, 2 points each here based on that. So hopefully it's a little bit more complicated with the scoring. And I mentioned this last week, the Stylomancer, so you can get a more upgraded appearance, look, armor, stuff. Okay. Backstabs, whatever, and then you've got your rules. They've got a tabletop simulator. It's just looks like a straightforward, easy to play, nice, light card game. I think it is what it is. I don't think it's making itself more than what it is. It's just something that you'd be able to get to the table really easily and play really easily. Now that shipping is $13. That's pretty expensive for a card game. That's half of the price of the game. That's relatively significant. Just be aware of that. And it also says VAT not included. So Europe guys, you might be a little bit out of luck on that one because that's probably going to be $40 US dollars before VAT. Oof. Yeah. Sorry guys. Although see one on the other end here a little bit later in the video. So anyway, that is about it. That is Dungeon Date, and it's relatively straightforward again, which is okay. Sometimes we need straightforward games. It's nicer that way. Aventuria, Epic Adventures and Extraordinary Heroes. Now, this is a game based out 2016, I believe, is the original base game, and this is adding the additional expansions of the Epic Adventures and the Extraordinary Heroes. Again, almost 3 times its funding goal within the first day from Ulysses Spiel, which is a little bit intriguing. And you might know Ulysses Spiel from what they have done elsewhere, not in this world. They are the guys who took over / bought out / trying to save Myth. So if you're familiar with Myth at all and the train wreck that sort of became, I know because firsthand experience, they're actually resurrecting Myth, and there's going to be a new Kickstarter, I think, towards the end of the year. They did a World of Myth history lore book in preparation of the new game called, right here you can see, Dawn of Heroes, which was relatively successful, 45,000 euros. So that was never the problem. This is a side note. Lore and art and style for Myth was amazing. And so if they could actually put a game that's good behind it, people like me who have even been burned in the past would actually be seriously looking at this again. So we'll see what Ulysses Spiel can put out there. But anyway, back to Aventuria. So it's a card game a la sort of Pathfinder, the card game, in the sense of what you're going to be doing and having your heroes and adventuring with your weapons and your abilities and, you know, fighting monsters and defeating your foes. But this is a little bit different because you're using a d20, as I talked about last week, and the d20 is a little bit different because instead of 20 being your crit, it's 1 being your crit and 20 being your critical fail. So it's a little bit different than what you're used to, and you can see that these monsters really do have a lot of those D&D elements. If you zoom in here, you can see it says on 1 through 8, attack does this. 8 through 10, attack does this. 11 through 20, attack does this. So there's a really that element of D20. So if you're not liking that side of things, if you don't want to see more D&D or something more like Arena the Contest, which it uses a similar mechanism, this game might not be for you. But if you think Pathfinder, the card game, is not necessarily up in line with what you would prefer, and you want a little bit more of the D&D Pathfinder RPG-esque battle elements, this might be of interest. Because there are quite a few expansions out there for this game. And it's like I said, since it's been around for about half a decade, you can see some of the reviews and some of the thoughts on Board Game Geek, even though there isn't much recent in terms of the new expansions and the new sides of things. But, I mean, the artwork is definitely enthralling. I like the idea of these types of games in general, but I just never quite get the feel that I always want to. So definitely a D&D element as you're doing exploration. You've got these narration cards as well. And you're learning things along the way that you're going to be using. You can see the different color-coded cards here that are probably going to give you different choices or different responses based on what you choose. Now, this one right here, The Curse of Borbarad, is exploring this tower, and this is actually a solo mission that you can be doing for this adventure card game. And you're going to be exploring its floors and trying to figure out what it is and how you stop it. So this looks like a very solid solo game. This is what I think of as either playing like one or two-handed. Depending on what you like and how you like to play this game. And so what are you getting in the new one? Well, you're getting 4 heroes. Each hero comes with their own deck, so you're not doing deck construction, you're not doing deck building. It's you have a deck, you're using how you use those cards, how you're manipulating them, when you're using them, in what manner matters more than how you can build your deck, as opposed to some of the other games of this nature that tend to be more along that side of things. And they style it more as like a big battle rather than individual mini fight scenes like some of the other ones are, like Pathfinder, for example. So here you can see a little better example of the hero, some of their cards, some of the various uses. I mean, because it looks like these even have, you know, more than one use in that sense. And so you can see there's another Treasure Hunter set, the Veiled Dancer hero set, and the Nameless One hero set. Servant of the Nameless One hero set. That's kind of unusual. And then 2 more small box expansions, Poltergeists and Operation Ritzholz, whatever that is. Up to 20 players for a co-op version. That's amazing. People must like this game because for individual characters, 20 euros for one individual hero box. So this is not for necessarily newcomers pricing. Newcomers are going to get you 2 of these, and one of the big box plus core card game is going to be 100 euros. That's a lot. That's a lot. And so you really have to like this game. And so you'd really have to check this out on Board Game Geek. And all the new stuff is 160 euros. So this is expensive. I was not expecting it to be this expensive. All the stuff that's been released ever is 600 euros. That's a ton of money for a card game. Again, card games. without exclusives. I don't see exclusives on here. I just see these being as stretch goals. I would have a hard time doing this. Now, just the core is going to cost you 45 euros, and you can see all the other pledge levels on the side here that we kind of talked through. You're going to be getting, you know, just a little bit of everything. I would love to play a game like this, but this is one of those where I sometimes like the idea of this game. I like the idea of Pathfinder rather than necessarily the actuality of it. And so this would definitely be a try before I buy type of game. If someone brought it to game night, again, it sort of strikes me as that. Like if someone brought this, I would totally try it out. Totally see what it was, because I think this is a game where in theory it sounds good, and on practicality it could go either way when it hits the table. And if you're like me, that's a lot of money to spend on something I'm not sure of, especially like I said, I haven't really heard of this before I researched it last week. Then that makes me worry about the secondary market. So if I don't like it, you know, how much of a loss am I going to take? You know, we've all had losses on games we didn't like, but you know, if I can only sell it for 50% of the price I paid, that's a little bit more of a loss than I'd probably want to take. And so I definitely would prefer to trade for it or buy it secondhand in that sense. Let's see, anything else? Nope, that's about it. The Ulysses spiel. Let's see where this goes. I might just follow this campaign until the end, because maybe we'll get some Myth Dawn of Heroes news as well at the end of this, maybe giving us some more timeline. I think they were thinking like end of 2021, but they may have even been punched to 2022. I don't know. I don't follow it that closely, so we'll see. But this is an interesting game, and I'd love to demo it sometime. Hunting Sasquatch, the board game. Talked about it last week. Almost quarter of the way to its funding. You are a bounty hunter trying to catch Sasquatch, but the other mythological creatures are getting in your way trying to stop you, including all of these guys that you see here. All you're doing, selecting your hunter, selecting your location, roll dice, apply effects to what matches up to what you can do or to what's on the location. So it's a little bit like your Elder Sign-esque type of game where you're matching, and if you match, great. If you don't, you won't get rewards. And then you can get whatever the reward is down here, and you can claim these locations. And so the more locations you claim, the closer you get to Sasquatch, the more points you get, and more points you get, you win. Again, for a card game, it's about $30, which, you know, it is what it is. Veteran Explorer gets you a little bit of everything, including the neoprene mat. The Veteran Explorer here gets you a copy of the neoprene game mat, but also 5 copies of the individual player mats so that each player can have one. I mean, for 6 neoprene mats, that's for $40, that's not a bad deal, but I'm not a big fan of the style or the art on it. So, I mean, personally, I'd rather just put it down in front of me in terms of cards. So it's a little bit more expensive from that side of things, but I understand where they're coming from. We'll see if they hit any stretch goals. Again, it's relatively straightforward. And another nice, straightforward card game. Shipping down here at the bottom. Spyglass Games, Hunting Sasquatch. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the art is a little bit less professional and a little bit less detailed than a lot of the others out there. And I think, again, not that it's bad, but it's better than anything I could ever do. But comparatively to the other ones we just looked at, with Mage Noir coming up next and the previously mentioned Aventuria, those are a notch above. And I think that's the sort of thing that helps you stand out in this extremely crowded market, extremely crowded card game market as well. Speaking of Mage Noir, now I'd never seen this one. I'd never heard of this. I actually saw it, I think, a day or two after I posted my last week's video. And so it kind of came out of nowhere from my personal standpoint, but it's 150% funded in the first couple hours. And it's another mage dueling, wielding 1 versus 1 type game. Again, speaking of crowded genres, this is an extremely crowded genre. And so the first thing I saw of this is I almost thought it was, and hoped it was more Aeon's End. You know, more cooperative, because you see less of that and you see tons of these mage style one-on-one duelers. Somebody who's working in conjunction with one of the other companies I bought a game from on the indie market. And it was a 1v1 magical dueler. And you really have to have something to help yourself stand out. And I'm not that good at picking out the standout ones and the great ones versus the generic ones, because I don't think you can really get a good sense without having played some of these, because they're so overhead wise, top down generic. And what I mean by that is that's not a slight. It's just, okay, you've got your mana. Okay, you've got your draw cards. Okay, you've got your spell cards. You know, how are you going to actually be using those and interacting? And sometimes you just really can't tell until you get in the throes of a game like this. And what you're doing is you're basically just dueling in that sense. You have one pile of a shared mana pool that you're choosing from. You're deploying your strategy. And now the interesting thing is you can choose when to use your powers, when to use your spells, and when to use them as resources or components for other spells. That is probably the big dynamic change. Again, I have to see it in person probably to really feel comfortable with it. I mean, it's a big elemental kick. That's where they're really focusing on. Rado actually has a run through of it, so I might have to check it out. And they also have Tabletop Simulator. So reading through the rule book, though, it is different. I'd have to see this again. I want to try this out for my own. So what are you actually doing? So you see, and this illustration here doesn't really do it justice. What you're doing is you have these 6 piles of ether that the game starts out with. And I'll show you the rule book because it's got a better illustration for anything that I can do. And you've got these 6 piles of elements, and they get strung out in front of you along this side of things. And what you're doing is at the beginning of your turn, you're choosing a total of 3 of them to take. And that can be any 3. It doesn't have to be the same element. It doesn't have to be 2 of one and 1 of another. It can be all 3 separate elements. And what you're doing is you're putting those from the infinite supply, as they call it, into the available, I can use this for my spells supply of things. What happens then is that's the stuff you're going to be using for your cards. And your cards are going to have a cost in the upper left-hand corner. Now, the interesting thing is here is you see when you draw these 3, you don't get just automatically to put all of these 3 into the available. You get to choose one pile or the other. So you're going to be splitting them up. So essentially at the first turn, you're going to be putting 2 in one and 1 in the other. Now you have to put the first one in the pile that has less going forward, but you get to choose which one you want to use from on your turn. And that is then where the rest of the game really takes place, is then when you are preparing a card. So just putting a card down, you have to be able to put the mana that is in the upper left-hand corner here underneath it. And only when you use the ability of the card does that mana go back to the pile. The other side of things is you can tap it, essentially. And that's using it as a component. Well, why would you do that? Is because some of the stronger cards require you to use that as a resource instead of mana or in addition to mana. That is the big difference in how this game actually plays. You can trade mana as well. That's a whole nother thing. There's all the different elements that we talked about, and there's different types of cards. So there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of equipment. There's a lot of items. There's a lot of magic. There's a lot of rituals. And becoming the Mage Noir, as they say, hence the title of the game, it basically makes you a lot stronger. So it's an ability to upgrade yourself within the game. They even go into the bottom that if you want to deck construct, so you don't want to use one of the pre-constructed ones, it gives you instructions on how to do it. Now the artwork's fantastic, but like I said, this is a very crowded genre, and does this hold up in terms of depth, replayability, and everything else? So 40 cards of each, 4 pre-constructed boxes. What's the price point on this one? $30 for an early bird, which is going to be up by the time you guys get this video. 36 US dollars, 30 euros. For the base game, that's not a bad price comparatively, actually. I actually like that price, though $42 is a little bit more. And let's see, meteors and the mineral element. The mineral element being the extra expansion here. And then the Master of Time gets you enough to play with 2 players and play with the arcane element as well. Early bird here again with everything. For the base game, that's a pretty good price. I guess I just wonder how necessary or how different are these 2 expansions, because to be honest with you, the mineral expansion, the Way of the Night Mage and the Way of the Time Bender sound a heck of a lot more interesting to me than some of the other elements. Like, I love the idea of being a Time Lord. Anyway, I would be very interested. Again, this is a try before you buy, because I've not seen it before, and I'm just not sure how different it would be, because I have trouble with these games because I'm not a big deck builder. Let me take that back. I am not a big deck constructor. I cannot build my own decks outside of the game. That requires a lot of time and effort that I don't have, frankly, enough to do. And maybe when my kids are older and they take an active interest in it, but I mean, even the Pokemon TCG that we do right now is very simplistic, and we don't do a whole lot of tinkering. It looks relatively solid. I think I would be happy with this game if someone brought it over, and I would be happy to play it as a very straightforward Magic the Gathering alternative with definitely some nuance in terms of those rules. And just how different is it, and what do these spells actually do? That would be the key, and, you know, make me a Time Lord. So that's it. You should check it out. It's funded. It's going to be an interesting game, and I hope we see more from it. Next up is Ghostwriter, a word game that I sort of mentioned last week as a different type of social deduction. They go full bore here at the top. They say $25 for US shipping. So that's a good price point, and it's just whether or not the game is actually for you. So you're a medium. So what are you trying to do? You are a medium, and you have a spirit on your team, and you're trying to figure out the clue that the spirit is providing you letter by letter before the other mediums. So what are you getting? Here you go. 50 object cards, 300 secret objects. So there's just a lot of variety if you're trying to figure out which one it is. And you have all these question cards that you can help figure out what the answer is, but everyone else sees what question is, so they're all going to be doing it competitively along with you. Form teams, choose an object, ask your questions. Only your team gets to see the question cards you choose, but everybody gets to see the answer. If you get the answer that you want, you call Silencio and you can guess. Learn from the other team and guess the object. So all of these are referring to one object. So you can see here, this gives a little bit better example because the illustration and the explanation that I gave is not the best. What part of the body do I use it with? Well, this is obviously mouth. This is obviously who's a fictional character that uses it? Donatello. What causes people to fight over it? And then you can see a little bit of these others. I'm not really sure what these bottom three are, but they're obviously closer to the cheese. So what's the object? That's pineapple, pepperoni, Domino's, cheese. It's pizza. There you go. But for some reason, the picture doesn't show up on these bottom ones, so that's why it's a little bit funny. But on the answer here, you can see that what's a common brand of it. So you can start to see, okay, which one of these is it? And so it's a little bit different take on the Codenames-esque type description game word puzzle, if you will. And this illustration, I think, does it the best. So you can kind of see, okay, where are the type of clues going to be? How do I describe them? You're giving part of the word, but not all. So maybe there's a little ambiguity there. And you're trying to be the first one to guess it on your team to get your team the point. It's quick. It's easy. I mean, there's a reason it's $25. I guess the question would be, as someone who hates just backing stuff on Kickstarter for the sake of doing it, where is the benefit? And honestly, that's probably the biggest downside is I don't see a whole lot of benefit except for the fact that it is $25. It's going to be a social deduction type game. And the question just is it going to be $25 later with free shipping? Is it going to be retailing at 15 or 20? The price isn't bad then, I guess. So it's definitely something different. It's one of those games where you're like, why didn't I think of that? But if you like this type of game, you should check it out. And we'll kind of see, though, because social deduction is a hard genre on Kickstarter to sort of do, especially without a fantasy element. And that's, I think, why it's got $6,000, which is more than respectable on day one. But we'll kind of see how it goes in terms of overall funding. Next up, Heroes of Valintia. Now, I came across this one, again, from a Spanish website, a Spanish YouTube channel. And there wasn't a whole lot of information. It's a chibi dungeon crawler RPG-esque style game. It's styling it after being able to play it with your kids as well. Now, the miniatures, as you'll see below, are not painted, so don't be fooled there. But they've done a great job of showing how they would look mocked up. Although I'm not as big a fan of some of the detail. I think it's a little bit not as well as I would like. They say assembled and unpainted, though. And there's a lot of standees because they realize that not everyone wants it. Here's an early bird with the stretch goals and the ogre miniature for $95. And so you can kind of see what you're getting here. So it reminds me very much of a combination of like Arcadia Quest and Massacre in just the aesthetic. It's a hexagonal board, so it's not your regular grid style. And you can see a little bit of what you're getting. You have 8 miniature heroes, and then all of the standees, the 70 standee enemies of the 26 different types that I mentioned. And there's doors, there's a whole rainbow of dice, and a lot of tokens and everything else you'd expect. So this is the miniature that you're going to be getting as an early bird. Heroes, your various tropes, your good guys, your bad guys. And, it's just a straightforward dungeon crawl. The biggest question, taking a look at the rulebook, what is the thing that sets it apart? One of the things is they talk about this campaign book written in the rulebook. The campaign book is sort of a 1v all. Sort of the one is more of the DM rather than the antagonist, where they're controlling the monsters and controlling the narrative, but not necessarily like actively like trying to defeat the rest of the people. Now, we talked about these dice right here. All of these dice, as you can see, they have slightly different sides, except for the purples. Those are something else, but they all have different sides in terms of the amounts of each of them. So this one has like a 3, and this one only has 1s and 2s, and this one has a 2 and a 3 and a 4. So depending on what dice you're rolling is going to give you a stronger or weaker attack or a defense. And these are done to use as successes, not necessarily damage. So you need a certain number of successes to succeed in a quest or an action. The other thing that happens in this game with the rules, looking at it, now you have your initiative deck, which reminds me very much of Aeon's End, where you're going to be drawing the cards to see what turn order is. The heroes, on the other hand, the heroes can be knocked out, they can be smashed is the term, but then they take a damage or a penalty, like -1 to perception, -1 to attack, something like that, and you can have multiple of those stack over if you die repeatedly, but after you take that penalty, you get started back at the beginning of full health and can go about your turn like normal. The rule book that they put on here is incomplete. It's only about 8 pages long, but you can take a look at it. The other thing that I struck is, well, one, that's kind of a cool dragon. So, sorry, side note, I get distracted easily. Like, shiny, ooh. And then you have a little bit of magic. You've got this free summoning dice, so the screen, okay, whatever. And the interesting thing, though, is this is more for you guys in Europe at this point, because what I saw down here at the bottom was sort of the opposite of, I think, what we're used to seeing on Kickstarter, is when you get past the videos and you get all the way down here to the bottom is the shipping. And so they say, okay, Spain, you know what, 9 to 12 euros. Great. Other nearby areas, 35. Even Australia, okay. Other countries in Europe, again, 35 to 40 euros. USA, 50 euros. And you want Canada or South America, good luck. It's going to be essentially the cost of a full game. So I wonder if that's what you're seeing. I would be interested to see what the numbers of people backing it, how diverse the population is of countries, because that could definitely be affecting the total funding goal right now. I honestly don't know if this is going to fund. It reminds me more of Candy Wars earlier from last month that also didn't fund and is going to be relaunching at some point. Just, I don't see enough that makes me think this is terribly different or, you know, unique enough like Core Quest as bridge or a tweener between kids games and adult games to make me want to do it. Like, if my kids are young enough, I'm going to play something young. If my kids are getting older, I'm just going to adapt or slowly introduce them to something more complex. And if you're going to do something in between, you really got to have a unique catch. And especially in the dungeon market with a little bit of miniature, but mostly standees, you got to stand out. And unfortunately, I just don't think this does enough of that. And I think that's probably reflective of the goal as well as the price points that I mentioned. So we'll see what happens, but ultimately they may have to rethink some things if it continues on this trend. So that's it for this week. Not a lot of huge things, but like I said at the beginning of the video, a lot of stuff coming up next week. Check out tomorrow's video because I'm going to be going over everything that's going to be coming out next week, plus or minus. Like I said, I think in the video tomorrow, there are a bunch of things between now and the end of the month that don't have dates yet assigned, so I'm never surprised if stuff pops up even the day or two before I post this video even. So, or after I record it. It's just the way things go. So, and who knows what else will come up. I'll throw it out there, and if you like it, let me know. As always, thanks for the watch, thanks for the view, and hopefully see you around. And hey, if you're new, leave me a comment. Let's chat. I'm always up for new conversation. Thanks, guys. Stay classy.